it's past 8 now. It's a minute past 8, so perhaps we'll begin now and people can just join us as and when they're able to. Okay, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and for whatever reason it is that you've decided to join us. We're just really glad that you're here. And thank you. This is a new experience for Duncan and I, our first webinar in a series of 3 webinars. So thank you very much for joining, as I said. And also, if you're watching this afterwards on YouTube, thank you also for watching. Okay, so the topic of our series of webinars is supporting parents and carers' wellbeing and practice through values-guided action. And this is a topic that is very close to our hearts. Duncan, I wonder if you could just introduce yourself firstly.
Sure, thanks, Alison. Yeah, so my name is Duncan Gillard. I'm an educational psychologist. I've a particular kind of interest in parent and carer wellbeing and parent practice, and the model that we're going to use today, which we'll introduce you to in a little bit, which I've been practicing, something like years now, I suppose. So it's great to be here.
And my name's Alison Benson. I'm an educational psychologist. Yeah, my interest in this field is very kind of varied, but yeah, very, very interested in parent and carer wellbeing. I see it as being really important as part of supporting children's wellbeing as well. So yeah, thank you everyone so much for joining us this morning. I'd just like to, just before we begin, really just direct you towards the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. You're able to pop some questions in that box and we will try to come to those at the end of the webinar. And also just to let you know that we will be doing some activities later on in this webinar. So if you could grab a pen and paper, you'll be able to join in with those activities. Okay, thank you. Okay. So about this series of webinars then, we know that parenting and caring can be, as well as one of the most rewarding jobs, of course, just one of the hardest jobs that as human beings we can do. So we know it's incredibly difficult, and then throw in all of the challenges in the wake of kind of coronavirus, and I think that just massively increases the challenges that parents and carers are facing right now. So we were really keen to deliver a series of webinars on this topic. We'll be delivering 3 brief webinars. They'll be once a week, starting today. They'll be 30 minutes each approximately, each Monday morning at 8 o'clock. So we've got one today, one next Monday, and one the Monday after that. We're going to try and make these as supportive and as practical as possible. So Duncan will be running us through some activities shortly, with the aim of supporting parental wellbeing and also parent practice.
So our kind of model of choice for these webinars is something that we've been using a lot in our practice as an educational psychology service. It's something called acceptance and commitment therapy, or acceptance and commitment training. I tend to call it acceptance and commitment training as a model. It's kind of the same driving model really for wellbeing when we're working with it in non-clinical settings. So examples of how we use this model in non-clinical settings are with parents and carers like yourself. So that's a kind of non-clinical application of this kind of evidence-based wellbeing model. And the other context in which we use it in kind of what we tend to describe as non-clinical settings is with teachers and educators for their wellbeing as well. So it's a really cool model, we think. It's a really applicable and evidence-based model, really practical, really useful, and has applications for kind of within the clinic, if you like, clinical work, but also in the community with parents, teachers, beyond the clinical. For those of you that are readers and like a kind of good read and want to dig in a little bit deeper to the model, we really recommend a book that was published in 2009 by a friend and colleague of mine, Lisa Coyne, and her colleague, Amy Morell, called The Joy of Parenting. And I've got a feeling that the link to that book might find its way into the Q&A or the chat function, one of those two at some point in the next couple of minutes, if it hasn't already. And there you go, it looks like it's found its way in there, and you can get that at any good bookstore. You can get it through Amazon or any good online.
Okay, so who is this series of webinars for then? So really it's for anyone who's interested in joining, I guess, but particularly we thought it would be aimed at parents and carers, and that might be you know, any members of family with caring responsibilities, maybe grandparents or foster carers. We know that the term parents and carers is very far reaching and very broad. So for anyone really who's interested, particularly this series of webinars may be of interest for parents of children who are particularly struggling at the moment in light of COVID-19. It's a very difficult time at the moment for children, as it is for everyone. So perhaps your child is particularly struggling at the moment, and we hope that this might be helpful for you. Also, parents who might feel that they themselves are struggling emotionally during coronavirus, and all of the kind of lockdown and everything that comes with that, or the homeschooling responsibilities. I think everyone's struggling in their own way right now, and that is completely normal, and something I think everyone is struggling with. But if you do feel that you are particularly struggling at the moment, we hope that there will be some helpful tools and activities within this series, and that will be of some support during this time. And also we recognise that parents of children with additional needs, or special educational needs, may also be particularly struggling at the moment. So it might be that this is also helpful for you. And similarly, you may recognise yourself in all three of the things that I said above there. And we do hope that there's something in this for you. Okay. Okay, so in this session 1, we're going to introduce the ACT model briefly, as it's applied to parenting practice and parental well-being. Duncan will run through a mindfulness exercise with us all. I'm really looking forward to that this morning. We will also be doing an activity together to help clarify personal values as parents. It might be something you've not given thought to before, but we hope to give some time to this morning to see what is it really that is personally really important to us. We also want to do another activity to translate those personal values that we identify into small specific actions for you to take away from today.
Okay, thanks, Alison. So let me do just a really kind of light, brief run through of the ACT model, so you kind of have a bit of an understanding of the kind of framework we're working in for this particular piece of work and for the 2 subsequent webinars next week and the week after. The way we like to introduce the ACT model is through this kind of 3 pillars of psychological well-being. So what I'll do is I'll kind of go through each pillar one at a time. And then I'll try, and at that point it might seem a bit ethereal or a bit nebulous, and so what I'll try and do then is kind of bring each one to life a little bit by sort of sharing a bit of my own experience and how I understand my own experience through these 3 pillars. So each of these 3 pillars is really like a metaphor for particular psychological skills that we know to be really important for human well-being. So I'm going to start on the left, and I'm just going to make my way to the center and then to the right. So on the left side, this particular pillar we call the openness pillar. So this is like a metaphor, this pillar, for being open to and willing to, in a sense, experience the full range of kind of events and experiences going on inside of our world. So all of our thoughts, all of our feelings, sensations, emotions, etc. If we move on to the middle pillar, this is a metaphor, this pillar, for kind of contacting with awareness the present moment. A friend and colleague of mine, Louise Hayes, who's a great kind of ACT practitioner with children and young people from Australia, she said on a few occasions, you know, we're in the midst of a mindfulness revolution. And we really are, in fact, actually, if you look at most of the psychological intervention models these days, certainly for therapeutic, clinical and non-clinical therapeutic work, almost all of them have got some kind of mindfulness piece in them. And that's very, very true for the ACT model. So this kind of mindful awareness, kind of contacting the present moment skill is the center pillar within these 3 pillars. And then over on the right side, we've got this active pillar. There's another kind of skill set that we know to be particularly important. for and linked to human psychological well-being. We have a particular meaning when we talk about the word active in this sense. Not so much just active as in going out, getting exercise, kind of being outdoors, although it can be this, but it's something a little bit more specific than that. So what we mean when we talk about being active in the ACT model is connecting to our values. Now, values we define as being personal qualities worth holding on to, personal qualities that we most want to show in our actions. Kind of like what you want to be about in the world or what you want to be remembered for. Both in general as a person, but more specifically in relation to our context, we say like a parent, perhaps. What kind of qualities do you want to be about as a parent? And then how do you translate those into meaningful actions that you can actually do to move your life in the direction of being that version of yourself? So that's a kind of brief whistle-stop tour through the 3 pillars model. Let me see if I can bring it to life a little bit for you through my own experience. So again, I'll start on the left and then gradually I'll kind of segue over to the right. So as a parent, I'm a worrier. I worry a lot about being a parent. I worry a lot about whether or not I'm a good enough parent. And you know, that shows up in a lot of different ways. I worry about whether or not I'm giving my children enough attention often. Worry about whether or not when I'm actually physically with them, am I mentally present with them and really trying to show up consciously with them in a really high quality way. Worry, am I doing a good enough of developing their play skills, their social skills? And of course, in the wake of COVID-19, I worry a lot about whether or not they are getting a good enough education. Am I doing the home ed piece well enough for my kids? And these worries show up a lot for me. In fact, they show up many, many times every single day of my life. They've always shown up, but they particularly show up in the wake of COVID-19. Now, many people would say that actually worrying is a bad thing and we want our worries to go away. From our point of view, though, from a psychological point of view, worrying is a really important part of the human condition. And we would suggest that it's really important to be open worries and to kind of see if we can spend some time with them and notice what it is inside them that's important. So from a psychological point of view, life is less about worry not and more about worry well. We often say like there's always a little pot of treasure inside the worry chest. So, you know, we humans, we don't worry about things we don't care about. So there's always something inside of our worries that we care about. Being a good parent, which has particular qualities associated with it for me personally, and it does for everybody else who's a parent, but being a good parent matters to me. I care very deeply about it. I worry about it. So moving over to that center pillar, that kind of awareness pillar, I can turn my attention toward, if I can be open to that worry, I've done that on the left pillar, I can really turn my attention to that worry and ask myself, make contact with it, with awareness, with openness, and ask myself, what is it inside this worry that really matters to me? Why am I worried? What do I care about? Okay. And then that kind of starts to segue me over to the active pillar, to the right pillar. When I ask the question, what do I care about? Well, what's the treasure inside this worry chest? Use that metaphor again. I'm kind of asking the question, what matters to me as a parent? Or, put another way, what values do I most want to show as a parent? And for me, when I think about my values as a parent, which I do a lot, I worry a lot about being a good parent, things like kindness show up, patience shows up, connecting, really meaningfully connecting with my kids, and fun and adventure. These things show up for me all the time when I think about what's me at my best as a parent. And so if I notice that I'm worrying and I turn my mind toward that and ask why it is that I'm worried about myself as a parent, I ask myself, what inside this worry matters? And it's usually one of those qualities. And of course, then it's just about saying, what can I do in my actions in the next minute, 5 minutes, minutes, hour, day, week, etc., that really demonstrates those values of kindness, fun, adventure, connection. So that's a kind of a sort of little personal disclosure that we hope will have brought the ACT model to life for you a little bit and demonstrated how these 3 pillars of psychological well-being, as the skills for well-being, can be. And we're going to do, if you're willing, a couple of little activities around the 3 pillars, sort of starting now, really. So we'll do a little light kind of a couple of minute mindfulness piece just to get us really centered and present. So we're sort of, in a sense, hovering over that center pillar and just working up that kind of awareness skill, bringing ourselves into the present moment. For our purposes today, we're kind of doing that in preparation for the next activity, where we're going to do a little, we're going to move over to the right pillar and do a little values clarification exercise. Translate that into some small parental actions that you hopefully might be willing to do between now and the next week's. So I've no idea how many of you, if any, have had a go at doing any mindfulness practice before. We'll keep this really mindfulness light and just do something brief, a couple of minutes or so. We're going to do something called the 3-step breathing space, which is where we just start kind of wide and just sort of notice the whole of our experience for up to a minute. And then we're just going to narrow the spotlight of our awareness. That's what it's centered in the middle of the hourglass. Narrow the spotlight of our awareness a little bit into the center of our breathing and notice the process of breathing. Take a few mindful breaths, and then we're going to come back out wide and notice the whole of our experience, having done a few mindful breaths. That field kind of guide us through that. So depending upon your circumstances, how you're sitting, standing, I don't know what you're doing, but if you can, kind of just see if you can bring yourself into a nice upright position, like a posture that supports an attitude of alertness and kind of awakeness. You can drop your hands down into your lap or onto your thighs, whatever works best for you, really. Now, some people like to keep their eyes open for mindfulness practice. That's absolutely fine. There's no kind of imperative to keep your eyes closed for mindfulness, but it can help. So give it a go. And if you feel a bit dizzy or uncomfortable with it, just open your eyes again. Fine. Willing, begin to close your eyes and rest your eyelids down over your eyes for a few moments. Just begin to notice how you're feeling as you sit here or stand here or however you're postured in this room, in this moment. What's the weather pattern like? Not trying to change anything, you're just bringing your awareness to bear on whatever shows up for you, whatever's here and now in this moment. Opening to what's already here. And see if you can narrow the spotlight of your awareness for a few moments to center your awareness on the process of your breathing. Breathing in, breathing out. Noticing the inhalation and the exhalation and the abdomen rise and fall just slightly as you breathe in and breathe out. Maybe noticing a slight pause in the movement of the breath at the point where it changes from inhalation to exhalation and from exhalation to inhalation. And then expanding your awareness around the breath once again to notice the whole of your experience here, or stand, however your posture. Noticing the whole of your experience, the breath, right the way out to the fingertips, tips of the toes, the top of the head. Noticing what it feels like to be here now. When you're ready, just beginning to open your eyes. If it's helpful, take a deep breath, maybe roll the neck a little bit, the shoulders, yourself back to in the room. So doing that with us. Hopefully that's kind of got you nice and centered and present with whatever's going on for you right now, whether that's generally pleasant or maybe feeling a little bit of discomfort. We're not trying to change the experience here. We're trying to kind of make contact with whatever it is that we're experiencing in this moment. Notice that and be with that. So we're going to move on to a little values clarification activity. So if you kind of think back in your mind to the 3 pillars model, we're segueing over to the right now and just placing our focus a little bit on this active pillar. So the next slide down, you'll probably hear my kids in the background. This is part of the course during COVID-19. Hopefully they won't come in, but if they do, well, they might say hello, you never know. So I'll just run through the instructions for this little activity. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give you 5 minutes and we'll just probably switch our videos off and just go quiet for 5 minutes while you have a go at doing this activity. And we'll pull the slide up, which has the instructions and materials that you need to just kind of go through it. So in this values clarification activity, and again, bear in mind that we said values are about personal qualities you want to show in your actions. Often people, when they think about values, they think about like, you know, school values, British values, organizational values. Often it's at the kind of group level. We're not so much interested in that today. I'm more interested in what matters to you as a parent, what you most care about, what you want to be, the qualities you want to show. So on the next slide, we've got a list of values, a list of personal qualities that may or may not, to varying degrees, be important for you as a parent. And when we click to that slide, what we'd like you to do is create a kind of sort of 3. Alison, did you put this together just as a little example?
Yeah, no, I can pop this together as your.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. So we'll show it you visually in a second. But so what we'd like you to do is just divide these values into 3 columns. We'll kind of get a pen and paper, draw out 3 columns. At the top of one column, if you just put really matters or really important. In the next column, kind of moderately important. And in the column on the right, just put not so important. So really important, moderately important, not so important. And then looking at the values in the list on the next slide, when we pull it up, what we'd like you to do is just see if you can write each of these values into one of those 3 columns. So each value that we've got written up there, just reflecting, ask yourself, is this a value that I really care about as a parent? Is this a value that I really want to show in my actions as a parent? And if it is, pop it in that first column, the really matters column, really important column. If it's moderately important, put it in the middle. And if it's actually not that important to you, put it in the right, as Alison's kind of demonstrating here.
I'm not sure how clear this is, sorry, but hopefully you can see there's 3 columns and the different titles that Duncan mentioned are at the top of each of the columns there, okay? It doesn't need to be neat, mine's very much not neat at all.
I can just about make it out, so
okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. So that's the first part, all of those values into 3 columns. You'll notice at the bottom of the list of values in the table, there's kind of like some cells that just say other, and that's just to give you permission if you want to, if there's values like personal qualities that you'd want to have in there that we've missed, by all means just add them in, just choose them and put them in your list, in, you know, really important or not. Once you've got that list of that 3 lists, we'd just like you to focus in on the list that you feel is really important, and see if even from that list of what's really important, you can choose 3 values to you that to you at this point in time feel really important, the stuff that matters very, very deeply to you, qualities you really most want to be about as it feels to you right now, right here. And then lastly, what we'd like you to do, if you're willing, is from that list of 3, just pick one. It may be that you can't differentiate between them in terms of how important they are, that's fine. We just need one that you'd be willing to work on over the next week or over the next kind of few days. Hey.
I think I was just going to, sorry,
Yeah,
Duncan, just
jump in.
kind of
Yeah, please.
in there. Sorry, I think it's really like important to sort of say as well that it's kind of about who you want to be and what you want to be. It doesn't have to, you don't have to be kind of looking at these values and thinking, well, actually, I don't think I'm really very much like that. Actually, this is about who you want to be and what's important to you. So yeah, just kind of hold it lightly. Don't overthink it kind of too much. And just kind of have fun with it, really. And these things change as well, right? I've done this activity before, and on one day I might be feeling one way, and another day I choose some different values, and that's kind of totally fine.
Yeah, I love what you said there, Alison, and it does kind of really impress me. It's like, we'll just hold, there's room for playfulness here. We can just hold this process lightly. And the reason is, as Alison says, it does kind of differ a little bit from day to day. If you did this every day for a week or so, you wouldn't, which by all means do, we'd love it if you did, if it was beautiful. You'll find it slightly different every day, I would bet. So there's room for playfulness here. This doesn't have to be the only time you've done it, and this is not like your commitment to yourself in terms of your values for your life. This is just what it feels like to you right now. Yeah. The only other bit of a kind of tip that I might offer, in case it's useful at this point, is see if you can notice those should thoughts creeping in when you try to kind of allocate a value in terms of its importance to you right now. You might notice your mind say, oh, I should really care about that. It really matters to me. But what we try to do is encourage people to, at this point, kind of ask themselves a question, yeah, but do I really care? And give yourself permission to put something in a not particularly important pile if it doesn't feel that important. I often give people the example of like order. Order is something that really matters to me, but I also have should thoughts that show up, and I put the value of order or orderliness into my really important part, and it gets there every time, particularly as a parent. I have thoughts like, oh, surely you shouldn't care about order that much. You know, maybe only boring people care about order. You care more about order than compassion. You know, this kind of stuff shows up. This is kind of what minds do. So this happens to us. These should thoughts show up. So we're just inviting you to kind of use that center pillar, and just shed a bit of mindfulness on those and ask yourself the question, does this value really matter to me? If those, we're going to give you 5 minutes or so to do that now, and we'll move to the next slide. I think we'll time 5 minutes. It's 8:29 now, so we'll give you until sort of 8:34, 8:35, and then we'll switch our videos back on, and we'll move to the next part of the activity, or to the final part of the activity. All good, Alison? Anything else you want to say?
And I think that sounds really good. Yeah. So hope you've all got your pens and paper and enjoy this activity.
Okay, so we're about 5 minutes in now. If you're just finishing off, feel free to carry on or just stop and listen to the next part of the instructions, and we'll kind of go from there, and then you can just finish off when we go into the next part of the activity, which is a kind of extension of this. So hopefully what many of you, or maybe all of you, will have by now is kind of one value that you feel really matters in your actions as a parent. And I'm going to move us on to the next slide, because what we're going to try and do now, if you're willing, is just see if we can. It's not working. Bear with me. I'm going to reshare again. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to try and do now is have a go at translating that value into some small kind of actions, or making sense of that value in relation to sort of specific actions and specific behaviors, like as a parent. So if on another sheet of paper, you could draw something like what you're seeing in front of you on this slide. So we kind of want like we tend to go for a rectangle in the middle, 4 ovals joined with a line over the top, and 4 ovals joined with a line at the bottom. Again, just really sketchy is absolutely fine. Just sketch it out. No, it doesn't have to be really neat. Once you've got that, if you could just write the value that you've chosen in the rectangle in the center. And for this next piece, we'll just give you perhaps 3 minutes or so for this last little activity of translating a value into as a parent into actions. See if you can write just briefly in some of those ovals in the top a few things that you've done over the last week. Demonstrate that value in your actions as a parent. So, you know, for me, fun is right on top for me at the moment. I want to demonstrate the value of fun with my kids. So playing football in the garden with my youngest yesterday, kicking the ball around was one really good example of that, because he around with me and had lots of fun, and so on. And then once you've got 2, 3, or if you like, all 4 of those ovals filled with just a few actions you've taken to show that value in your actions over the last week, see if you can drop down to the bottom and write in the 2, 3, or if you like, all 4 of the bottom ovals, a few actions that you'd be willing to take, that you'd like to take over the next week, bring that value to life just a little bit more in your life as a parent. So again, we'll give you, I think we said 3 minutes, Alison.
Maybe 3 minutes for this last one.
3 minutes for this last one, yeah. So 3 minutes for the last one. We'll disappear again for 3 minutes. We'll time that, and then we'll come back and bring the session to a gentle close and take questions wherever you want to. I can see there's already one question up there, and we will get to that. Okie doke. All right. So good luck. 3 minutes.
coming towards the end of that final activity now then. Yeah, okay, and it's hard, right? This sort of values, finding out, sort of trying to clarify your most important values, but also such an important thing to do, I think, and so important for well-being, for parental practice and for parental well-being. So yeah, we really hope that you enjoyed those activities.
Just to say also, so we really love it if you wanted to do, if you had a go at doing those values-based actions, kind of, and noticing that you're doing it in the service of a value over the next week, and if you wanted to at a certain point in the kind of in the Q&A function, in the second webinar, kind of comment on or ask any questions around the process of doing that, we'd be really interested to hear your experience and the questions that you have.
Yeah. No, it's a really good idea. I think it's kind of an ongoing process, isn't it? So it'll be interesting to see how you guys find it over the next week. So thanks so much again for joining us this morning. So our next webinar then will be the same time, 8 o'clock next Monday morning on the 15th of June. And in this second session, we're going to be exploring a little bit more mindfulness practice for parental and carer well-being. Going to introduce you to a really useful and flexible tool called the ACT matrix, which is another fantastic sort of means of exploring these values and how it sort of guides action, in particular parental practice and well-being. And yeah, you'll have a go at kind of using this matrix next Monday morning, focusing on self-care for parents and carers. Okay. So yes, I think we have at least one question in our Q&A box at the bottom here.
Feel free to chuck them in and we'll see what we can do.
So shall I read out the first one then from Kate, who asks, would you recommend sorting the words into lists and then comparing with a partner or co-parent as a helpful thing to do or not? Very
excellent question. Really good question. Thanks, Kate, for asking it. What we tend to caution about, I suppose, is you can share the content of your list if you want to, but what we don't want to happen is for people to feel under pressure to like hold and live the same values as other people, because we're individuals. We're individuals as people, we're individuals as parents, and this work, this ACT model, is about helping people to connect with what matters to them. But sometimes those should thoughts can creep in, right? And they can get even louder if somebody else has put something in their top column that you've got in your bottom column. Like, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I should put that value further up then, actually. And it's okay, you know, to have a value that some people may not think of as quite so important. Some people whose opinions you really respect even may not think of it as quite so important as you. So we kind of we'd suggest just be a little bit cautious about sharing content. And if you do, just be willing to notice some of those thoughts about, oh, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. One thing, but what we do really encourage is sharing of the process, you know. So rather than questions about like, what have you got in your list and what have you got in your list, more questions about, what was that like for you? Was it easy to connect with a value? Hard to connect with a value? Was it easy to translate it to action? Was it hard to translate it to action? What do you think might show up in the process of trying to translate this value to action? Or I'd find myself checking my emails, I'd find myself feeling like I haven't got time, you know, that. So the process over the content, sharing that can be really, really useful.
Thank you, Duncan. I think at the moment we don't have any further questions. So yeah, perhaps if you think of any other questions over the course of the next week, then you can pop them in the Q&A function on this webinar next Monday, perhaps. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, hopefully see you next week. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.